back. So, a little advisory from experience, as somebody who has been watching this space, and I'm sure you as well, when it comes to the era of politics, because very soon INEC is going to come out with their timetable and schedule and all of that. So you'll see primaries, post-election litigation from primaries, and there's so many things, and there will be nuances and statement. What you can help yourself with is to be able to sieve out what is important from the noise, because there's going to be a lot of political noise and hot air coming through because the build-up has already started. Well, somebody who has seen this as far as the politics of Nigeria is concerned, he understands the politics and he understands the economy, is my guest tonight. Let's bring in my guest, Professor Utomi. He's a political economist and the convener of the Big Ten. Prof, thank you so much for coming on the program.
It's a great pleasure.
Yes, Prof, let's start with the immediate, the one that happened yesterday. So let's talk politics first before we build on that to other issues within the time we have. And you were in Enugu State when Mr. Peter Obi finally decided that ADC is the destination of choice for him ahead of his ambition to run for the office of president in 2027. And as I said at the very beginning, this has generated a lot of reaction. I don't know why controversy is all over my lips. A lot of reaction as far as that movement is concerned. So, first, are you part of the ADC now as a person? And what do you make of this defection of Mr. Obi?
Well, you know, to the best of my knowledge, the work that has produced this ADC renaissance started quite a bit back. And if you listen to Chief Raf Okenwosu, who was chairman of the ADC, when he spoke yesterday, he talked about how he and I have worked for years to make this happen. He talked about how I was the first presidential candidate of the ADC. And since that, in 2007, we have been working strategically to bring about this moment. Mr. Peter Obi was in on this conversation from get-go. He didn't defect yesterday. We've been working at what will work to ensure that Nigerians are brought together under one tent. If you listen to him, he talked about inclusion. Everybody coming together, because that's the only way we can make progress. Forget politicians who think that all they need to do is grab power and everything is okay because they are, quote unquote, okay for a moment. But the country is not in a position to really seriously work together. When you have the kind of divisiveness, the kind of exclusion that Nigeria currently is, economic progress does not take place. Forget about 4% GDP growth. You get spots here because oil prices went this way or that went that way. Real growth doesn't take place without peace and a clear direction brought into by all, working together to ensure that we get there. So, about a year or two ago, a group of well-meaning people began to meet. I was there at the very first meetings. We met in Nigeria, we met outside of Nigeria, and these conversations continued. It is this conversation in terms of how the Southeast and the South-South, to an extent, get their act together to be part of, that was unveiled in Enugu yesterday. This will continue to progress until a very inclusive all-Nigerian initiative to rescue Nigeria takes place using the ADC platform. I mean, if you recall, in 2022, before the 2003 election, most of the work that some of us did was based on trying to bring the labor movement, not the Labour Party, by the way, the labor movement into this process. Those meetings took place in the office of the president, the then president of the NLC, Ayuba Waba. I chaired all of those conversations. It was supposed to be the ADC and 3 or 4 other parties, SDP and co, stringing together. But at one of those meetings, my friend, Femi Falana, SAN, suggested that Labour cannot be watching some renegades run away with their party. And it's important to go and retrieve that party and make it the base. It was as a result of some consent judgment obtained by Femi Falana SAN that we did what eventually happened in 2023, make that party the basis for engagement. Obviously, some of the parties didn't keep to the terms of that consent judgment. We began to slide down, and the idea of having to create that kind of platform came up again. And this led to the meetings that have produced what is now going on with the ADC.
Prof, between 1993 and this is 2026, politically, there were 2 outlier moments. 1993, we had I think the Muslim ticket, the MK Abiola, but Nigerians rallied around the SDP and gave it victory, even though the military did what they did, that we're sure. We now, they have apologized, although there are no consequence for that action. 30 years after, there was another outlier moment where a party without any governor, any structure, came third by the INEC declaration, which is Peter Obi in that election. 6.1 million without any structure, as against Atiku Abubakar 6.9, and then the president 8.7 million. So, Prof, where I'm going to with my question is that if you listen to some of the members of the ruling party, they said they've perhaps learned their lesson that it's not going to happen again. Now they have 28 governors in their fold, about 76, 78 senators in their fold, over 260 House of Reps. Remember, if we go to a House of Assembly, there's loads of them. As we speak, ADC has not made any strong route as to winning any significant election. So, politically, how is this going to work?
You make a profound point by going back to 1993. Thank God I was a significant actor in all of this. In 1993, the party that generally had the establishment in its favor had Tofa and somebody that's very dear to me as his running mate. But the Nigerian people assessed the situation and recognized that the best interest of the people, the ordinary people of Nigeria that will advance the common good of all, was that led by Chief MKO Abiola. There was a debate, and I tell people very often that they ignore what really can happen when true democracy is allowed to flourish. There was a debate between Bashir Tofa and Abiola. Most people who watched that debate decided, okay, this is a done deal. Bashir Tofa cannot run Nigeria. That's how the tide went to Chief Abiola, and that was a defining moment in Nigerian history. It had nothing to do with structure and this and this and that. It had something to do with the belief of the Nigerian people. In 2023, the same thing happened. All the structure, all the whatever, suddenly collapsed in the face of people saying, we've had enough of this political class. We've had enough of these characters who are setting our country back. We want to take our country. Now, those characters who have strength in state capture ensured that the will of the people was prevented from coming about. They did everything. I mean, the evidence is all over the place. When you mentioned number 6 this million, I kind of laughed because every semi-intelligent person knows who won River State. For example, simple example, BBC has his study, his report, civil society had it. So when you say 6 this, 6 that, that's all gibberish. That's nonsense. We have an institutional capture of the Nigerian state that altered the will of the Nigerian people. And God, being the fantastic God that he is trying to move all these people into one party so that he can sweep out of existence the current political class in Nigeria which has humiliated the country, brought down the quality of life of the Nigerian, been so divisive that Nigerians are fighting and hating each other, something I didn't imagine possible in the past. So I would like all of them to defect into one party, whatever that party is called. And then the wind that blew in 93 and blew in 2023 will blow them all out of politics for the rest of their lives. Because the Nigerian people need something new. They need a new beginning. We can't continue like this. All our years are way ahead of us in terms of how human beings live.
So the big question is, Prof, the big question is, who exactly are we dealing? Because now, I think I saw a statement. In fact, there has been this back and forth between the Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, has not descended into the political arena in those conversations now, talking about the issue of zoning, that this whole thing is already planned, that Peter Obi is just going there just to become a vice presidential candidate. He talked about the zoning, that this whole thing is about Atiku Abubakar. Atiku Abubakar has been contesting more than everybody who is, I think the only person that has been contesting election as far as at that level, there's none. Even Bola Tinubu was contested as a senator and won when Atiku Abubakar wanted to be president. So it's been moving from one party to the other. He is saying that, look, all of this is about Atiku Abubakar, and that's why the ADC is silent on zoning. Even though he's speaking from the point of opposition, and it may seem like a meddlesome interloper, doesn't he have a point?
He does not. Why he does not have a point is that I can tell you that Peter Obi will contest for the presidency. The day he becomes somebody's vice president, I walk away from his corner. I can tell you that for a fact. And secondly, something very important for this election to bear in mind. The Nigerian presidency has become a retirement home where people go for the Nigerian state to pay their medical bills. It is not acceptable. They don't have the fitness to run the country. The last one, the current one, have essentially been government in absentia leaders. I, Utomi, I'm insisting that I will canvass to the Nigerian people that nobody over the age of 70 should run for an executive position, whether it be governor or president. Yes, a few people can stay in the legislature till they are 75, possibly even close to 80, but the Nigerian people must not continue to tolerate the presidency being where you keep people who need medical attention and are doing so at great expense to the Nigerian taxpayer, who is not getting the quality of service they should get from these public office holders.
Prof, are you indirectly saying, because what you're saying by implication means that people like Alhaji Atiku Abubakar should not have any business running for the primaries, because for you, first, is over the age of 70, so that is on the checklist is out. Second, if he wins and beats Peter Obi, you're out as well. Is that what you're saying, so that we're clear?
Yes, indeed. What I am saying is because of principles. If you check my history, I've acted always on principles. And my principled position is that nobody over 70, and that includes me, I'll be 70 in 1 month. That means I cannot run for an executive position in Nigeria again in my life. And if I were appointed to one, I will not accept. I gave what was called a Sherman Declaration on this matter recently. And if people want to remember what the Sherman Declaration is, you know, there was a very popular Civil War general in the United States, probably the second most popular Civil War general fighting with Lincoln. He was so popular, people wanted to draft him for the presidency. And General Sherman said, I will not, and I repeat, will not accept any attempt to draft me. I will not accept a nomination if pushed through without my consent, and I will not serve if I am elected. This is a patriot saying, I'm not appropriate for reasons for this office. And in researching the Sherman Declaration, because I wanted to make one myself, one of the things that I found was profound work on why many nations have not gone where, or polities where they should go. Ego, the ego of individuals. There's a nice book written by a fellow called Ryan Holiday. It's titled, "The Ego is the Enemy." Political actors must be able to look at the big picture, the common good of all. At 70, I am flying back and forth hospitals to check myself out. I know I'm running low on energy and all of that. I expect that every true patriot who gets to 70 should look themselves in the mirror and say, look, it's time to help my country in some other way. And that includes all the actors that are pushing to the front now, or most of the actors pushing to the front now, whether it's the incumbent or my dear friend, by the way, Waziri is a very dear friend of mine. In 2007, I wanted him to win the presidency. But circumstances of history have gone as they have gone. And ego should go back to say the realities of biology are such that I should not be seen contesting executive office. I therefore yield and say, I am father of the nation, and I will support people who can make it happen with my counsel and all of that, which is what I, Utomi, is going to do.
All right, Prof, we'll take a break. When we come back after the break, within the time we have, I want you to do a quicker assessment of Tinubu's management of the economy. He constantly said in his speeches there was no other way than the way he had to do it. And it was quite clear. What I will do will hurt you really bad, but trust me, in time, you'll be grateful I made that decision. And he's sticking to that position because he's talking about consolidating on the gains so far. And the numbers from the macroeconomic level looks good. So we'd like you to assess it when we come back after this break. Welcome back. My guest is Professor Utomi. He's a political economist and also the convener of the Big Ten. Prof, thank you so much for staying with us. Prof, let's talk about the things that the president has said. I had to go back to, he reeled out some of the, the economic numbers. He talked about robust GDP growth for each quarter. The prorated, annualized prorated is looking at 3.7% GDP growth. He's saying expected for 4%. They didn't do well with the crude oil production, estimated 2.06, but they are doing an average of 1.4, 1.5, while the crude oil numbers projected to have been $75, but now it's about 60 or so. Inflation has come down, though rebased, and even the GDP rebased as well to 14%, but it has gone down about 10% or so. The exchange rate has stabilized around 1,400 plus, depending on what day you're looking at. They also their bragging right is also the 45 billion in external reserve or foreign reserve in that sense, although our debt is on the big side and the interest rate is on the big side. So you understand these numbers better than I do. What do you make? Is there something positive from his management of the economy, and what are they doing terribly badly?
Well, Jeffrey, one of the terrible things about looking at economic development is that, as Americans like to say, there are lies, there are damn lies, there are statistics. You can say anything you want to say with statistics, and they will look and sound good. Look, in the last 2 years, I've been working on a book. Unfortunately, I couldn't complete it. My target was to finish it by this month, but all kinds of developments are pushed back. So maybe the next 6 months I might finish it. And what I've tried to do was look at why poverty persists in Africa, in spite of all these prescriptions of growth strategies. And one that is still so fresh in the minds of many of us, and I was a player, I was one of those who rationalized and justified it, was the structural adjustment program. Look, when adjustment, quote unquote, literally saved us from being asphyxiated by policies of the IMF and all of those who became debt collectors for those who gave us loans that we should not have taken. And Joseph Stiglitz analyzes this very well in Globalization and Its Discontents. When they began to prescribe the policies of the so-called Washington Consensus, many of us, including myself, saw no alternative, spoke in the way that the present players are speaking. And we saw apparent growth spots from the fact that reform of foreign exchange system certainly made trade begin to run and all of that. And we tried to explain why people were still poor. We used things like the J-curve to talk about the lag in performance that you will soon follow. You will see it. 30 years later, it is clear that structural adjustments set us back. And I can tell you with all clarity of mind and purpose, the pillars of development in Nigeria, like the educational system, were destroyed by those policies. To rebuild what we had as education when some of us were undergraduates will take us quite some time and a lot of resources. But this is part of the damage that statistics like they're throwing at you did to us in 1986 to 95. So let me bring people back to reality and thinking. One of the big issues around all these policies that have been thrown around, for example, is, oh, we need to increase revenues. Plus, we don't collect enough revenues. People don't pay taxes. New tax laws, this, that. All well and good. The international ratios of tax to GDP and all of that. The question is, are we thinking production? How do we produce? But back in those days, there was a fellow who gained a lot of fame with supply-side economics, Arthur Laffer. And the Laffer curve was about the relationship of taxation to investments and growth. That reality of the Laffer curve exists. The policies that we're jumping around saying are great will prevent growth from taking place in this country. We don't have any clear industrial policy that will enable us begin to have real growth, and yet we are preventing the building of capital in our country. You go and look at Thomas Piketty, the French professor of economics, who writes about capital in the 21st century. And you will see that as we are unable to build capital, a few men in California, I joked about it at the WTO in Geneva in September, a dozen men in California own more capital than the continent of Africa. Do we have a strategy to deal with this? No. Tax the people. You just make the people poorer.
All right, Prof.
People
Yes.
To do more.
Yeah. Prof. Umar, thank you so much. Economic conversations with you are quite interesting because of your wealth of knowledge. And we hope we can have more time some other time to explore it as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, it's the lived-in experience of the people that perhaps for developing economies is the biggest measure of progress, as we always say. But Umar, thank you, Prof. Thank you so much for your time. And we wish you the very best. Now that it's clearer that we have this direction in terms of the politics. Professor Utomi is the convener of the Big Tent and a political economist. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Pleasure.
Everyone.